Council, we're ready to go. Okay, good evening, council and staff. A warm welcome to those that are joining us virtually, as well as those who are with us in person. Those in attendance, I would ask you to ensure that your communication devices are either shut off or put on vibrate. Today's special day is a recognition of poutine, the indulgent combination of cheese, curds, fries. We're going to be celebrating its 60th anniversary this year. Its origin goes back to 1957. It's traced to a restaurant in Warwick, Quebec. There's some special stuff you can share with your family.
Good diet food.
Does anybody live to tell about it?
Cardiologist of dreams. There we go. Tonight at 6 o'clock, we will have a special presentation when we are honored to recognize two of the members of our Plympton-Wyoming Fire Department as they reach a milestone service award. I would like to remind everybody that this meeting will be streamed live and recorded for the public's viewing on the town's YouTube page. We acknowledge that this land on which we are gathered today is part of the ancestral land of the Chippewa, the Ottawa, and Potawatomi peoples, referred to collectively as the Anishinaabe. It is through the connection of the Anishinaabe with the spirit of the land, the water, and air that we recognize their unique cultures, traditions, and values. Together as treaty people, we have a shared responsibility to act with respect for the environment that sustains all life, protecting the future for those generations to come. Council, I would remind you, if you have a pecuniary interest, to declare it at the appropriate time. Of course, we have a delegation. We have one delegation this evening.
Your worship, we have Ken Phillips here from the St. Clair Region Conservation Authority.
Well, Ken, I'd like to welcome you on behalf of council and staff back this evening. I think the main gist of what we're looking for is some questions relating to the budgets. And I understand you have a PowerPoint presentation, so the floor is yours, and I hope there'll be some time after that we have some questions to share with you.
Well, thank you very much, Mayor and members of council, for the opportunity to present to you today. So what I've just done is quickly put together an overview of how our budgeting process works, how we start, where we go, and then outlining some challenges we faced, and then provide and then I'll be able to answer any questions you may have. So rocking and rolling here. Sorry, what did I do wrong? So in terms of our budget, I'll just get started while we wait for that thing to get caught up. So we'll begin our budgeting process in June. So myself and staff myself and the Director of Corporate Services will direct staff to come up with whatever their budgets are, just so we have a rough number and we know what our rough number is to try and keep things reasonable. We will then take that to our board of directors in September to say this is our proposed draft budget number. Yay or nay. And so I'll use this year as the last example. We initially came in at 5.2%. The board requested us to lower it if it was all possible. So we brought it down to 4%. Then in October, we'll present the draft budget to our board of directors. If they approve it, we then send out notification to each of our municipal partners, 30-day discussion period. And then any questions, any councils which would like me to come back, I can certainly do that to talk about budgets and budgetary pressures. We have traditionally brought our budget to the board in December. We'll usually do that in all years except for municipal election years. We just postpone it till all the committees are designed and everybody's ready to go. There we go. And then finally, it'll be approved in our budgets will be approved in December. And so how it's worked out is what's called a weighted vote based on CVA apportionments. That's current value assessment. So all the properties within our watershed, whatever your percentage is of that. So the total value of everything in Plympton-Wyoming, basically, and then compared to Sarnia, or that's how your budget figure is calculated. And then the total budget is a 1-for-1 vote. And then finally, the final budget and levy letters will be sent out in the new year. So in the last couple of years, so a bit of a history lesson. This are the challenges we face with our budgeting. So prior to 1994, conservation authorities received $50 million in transfer payments. So collectively the 36 CAs. They also received what was called supplementary grants. So if you're a smaller authority, you get extra money so you could carry out duties and services. At that time, in 1994, our allotment of that 50 million was 800,000. In 1996, the province decided to overnight cut that to $7.6 million divided up between the conservation authorities. Our allotment was $310,000 and remained that way until 2012. And in 2012, the provincial government cut it by a further $200,000. At that time, those cuts were only absorbed by two authorities, Toronto Region Conservation Authority and the Grand. So the rest of us still had our funds. The current government cut our funding back to 3.8 million in 2019. So we now get $160,000. As I said, so you can see the incredible decreases as we go. With the current change to our budgeting structure, in terms of moving a couple of programs into what's called Category 1 mandatory services, that has now led to a $900,000 shortfall because those used to be programs we'd have to scramble to get money from somewhere else. So that has now been placed directly on the municipalities. So what our board has decided to do is implement a 2% increase every year for a number of years going forward, strictly dedicated to making up that $900,000 shortfall. It's probably not enough money, but we know there's certain limitations on the budgets of the municipalities, particularly because we have so many smaller municipalities. We don't want to double your levy basically overnight to make up for that. Another thing that's just come up in 2022 is that permitting fees have been frozen, so much like your development charges in the region, in the county. Our fees have been frozen every year. So that's had a direct impact on our levy as well. We had just increased our staffing costs to deal with all the new development coming in. So last year, for 2023, it's approximately $50,000 shortfall in terms of where our fees should have been versus what the province said. So our board in 2022 passed a resolution to increase our fees dramatically, 150% by 2028 to help keep the cost for municipal levies down. So basically put it on the users. Who's ever using stuff, they're going to pay for it. So the province says, nope, can't do that. So we're falling further and further behind with that. And then finally is our long loss of grant funding. So last year we lost about $150,000 in long-term grant funding, and they funded primarily our Category 3 program. So earlier, or late last year, I was in to talk about our Category 3 programs, and those have changed. This is where the challenge was coming in. We're losing money for these programs. So education, forestry, conservation services, stewardship works, those types of things where we can't get the grants anymore. So they've either changed it to a third party can apply for the grant, but they can't use us to give the money to, even though we're the only ones capable of doing the work. And other, for example, we can buy trees, but we can't get money to put the trees in the ground. So these are some of the challenges we faced. So what our budget looks like this year shows you the division. So we do get a decent amount of money from the federal government through Environment Canada and Fisheries and Oceans. The municipal agreements now make up 21% of our budget. So those are our Category 3 agreements. Of our 17 municipalities, 13 have entered into Category 3 agreements with us, which now make up 20% of our budget. That amount would have been under the other income, so grants and fees. So it's been a big boost for us. And then our user fees as well. So there's impacts. Obviously, our conservation areas are weather dependent. So if you get good weather, people will come. If you don't, they don't. And then, of course, the freeze to our funds. So in terms of our Category 3 programs, just once again, what the three main ones are. So community outreach and education. So what we've got roughly $100,000 extra through our Category 3 agreements this year. And what that has meant to us is astronomical, that we now have matching funding. So primarily if a stewardship program, for example, needed to do something, they had to have matching funding from somewhere. That was always very difficult, but now we can plug in the amount of money through our Category 3 agreements. That takes care of that matching funding. So in most cases, we can double or triple the amount of money we're going to get. So it's been a huge bonus for us. Much the same with our conservation services group. So we now have the money to actually put the trees in the ground. That's what the benefit of that category 3 agreement was. And for in terms of our community outreach and education, same thing. We lost about $30,000 or $40,000 for education funding. We used to get a big grant from a private sector company. They no longer supply that, so that money helped to offset those costs. That, in a nutshell, is our budgeting process and how, where we are and some of the challenges we face. So certainly happy to answer any questions.
I think that's very informative. So I'm gonna go to my council. If you have any questions, I'm gonna begin on my left. Deputy Mayor, do you have anything that you'd like to ask Phelps?
Well, to tell you the truth, I do. And I probably are, on your board of directors, has asked this question, but I really have a difficult time understanding why when we took 2 of your parks over, why we still have an increase in the revenue that you want from us.
So that's just the percentage increase. So your levy increase would have been 4%. The so the 9,500 you won't pay us. So that wouldn't have been included. I think it was roughly $9,500.
It's not been explained to me like that before. Never mind. Cancel that question. Okay. It's enough for now. Okay, thanks.
Councilor Van Claveren?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, appreciate that presentation. I don't really have a question necessarily other than I'm sorry to see that you're getting squeezed on the top end there. And, but you guys are scrappy and you do good work. I'm sure it'll get figured out and we appreciate the work that you do. So.
Councilor Wolbett?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, you guys do good work and as most conservation authorities do, but you know, what I don't see in here, and I know this is not a place for detail, but for some reason, the provincial government are cutting you back in a lot of categories, campgrounds, on and on. I'm not going to get into a bunch of details. They're cutting you back for a reason. We struggle with our own budget here, our own budget increases, and for quite a few years now since I've been on this council, especially the last 2 terms, your increases have been fairly significant to this municipality and probably all 17. But I think there's a reason that the government's cutting you back. And so what I would have expected to see with what's going on is for you to explain to us, what have you cut back? Now, I know we took on the 2 parks. I mean, that was a big deal for us because we could see those parks going downhill, to be quite honest with you. We lost the boat launch, which, by the way, for a lot less money than you guys were going to spend, we were able to put it back in service. We picked up McEwen Park, which, you know, those things in there that were removed from it, and really, you know. So anyways, we took it on. So what we're seeing here, we keep seeing these increases, and yet we are using you less and less and less. Because we don't, well, the only 2 parks we've got them back now.
In terms of how you use this, I have to stress that a lot of it's the permitting and reg side of things. So one of the pressures we face is that we are grossly understaffed for our permitting and regs department or planning's department to get stuff out the door. So with the new timelines and everything, we hired a 3rd-party independent study of our departments. And they said, you need more staff. So we've had to add 3 staff. So a lot of the increase you're seeing is for those staff wages for those 3 staff. What we hoped to offset those costs with was a dramatic increase in our fees. And the province said no. So that directly falls on the shoulders of the municipality, unfortunately, because we can't get rid of the staff, because if we get rid of the staff, then we lose more money because we can't get stuff out the door within the timeline. So that's where you see a lot of the pressure on municipal levy increases is strictly for those staffing.
As I said, Ken, we struggle with our own budget, so it's our job to question.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And we talk about the amount of trees, you know, we talked about this a little bit before with you, I believe, when you gave a report, but you said there was 18,000 trees planted in Plympton-Wyoming. But most of that was on private property, right?
Yeah, we'll go to anybody who approaches us. So
Who pays for that?
So the property owners.
They pay 100% of.
Yeah, we have certain grants, so we'll help supplement them, but they pay for the cost of the trees.
So we don't, none of that comes out of municipal money. And your conservation authority does a good job. We need you.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Rodriguez.
Thank you. Thank you for coming here today. I believe one of the questions, was the increase with the category 3 being removed. But yet the number didn't decrease before the levy increase. But I think that, and maybe you can clarify this better, it had to do with the assessment, property assessment.
That's right.
increase.
So if you've had, so every new house that gets built, that adds on to the current value assessment of the municipality, which then increases our, whatever your percentage is. So if you have zero growth, then obviously your percentage increase would be zero, but whatever the growth rate is, that's how it gets calculated. We don't calculate that figure. That comes from the province itself. So they give us those figures. So
And that comes from through impact. And
MPAC actually hasn't reassessed, like much like yourselves for your tax base. This is strictly from the Ministry of Natural Resources through using impact figures and something else. Whatever their formula is to calculate it.
right, even though there hasn't been reassessments, there
That's
is
correct.
additional.
There is additional homes and that's just, yeah.
Correct, and the category 3 services that were removed from being funded by the government.
So they were never funded by the government. So
Or
just to
grants.
clarify that, yeah, the grants, yes, that's correct.
And that's when you were looking for municipal,
That's correct.
and that category 3 includes.
That's correct.
So that money is partially funded through those grants for those private properties.
That's right. So there are programs like Trees Canada, Trees Ontario give out so much grants money, but they will no longer. They will give you money to purchase, as I said, they'll give you money to purchase the trees. They won't actually give you money to have staff to actually put them in the ground. So it's kind of one of those weird things of, and they've even acknowledged that it's not an acceptable practice, but this is how the funding mechanism from their funder, which is the provincial government in some cases, has decreed things to go, so.
Thank you. Councilor Basil.
I have no questions there already asked. Thank you.
Councilor Bojan.
Thank you. Just one question. So I know, so the general levy. So in the revenue source is 14%. That's a CVA one that's calculated, that comes from the ratepayer. So the municipal agreement of 21%, is that the one where when you came back for category 3 funding?
Yes, that's correct. So that's above and beyond your levy.
And so the only reason because it's no fault of your own, you already said it, but we're talking 35% of the budget is now coming from the ratepayer in the municipal level, 28% from the upper levels. So in my opinion, something's got a budge and it's not the municipal ratepayer at that level. It's got to be either it let you increase your user fees or reopen some grants or some funding. Because when I look at that, when municipal ratepayer is covering 35%, I know you have no other choice but to come here, but clearly something's broken. It's that the grants are gone and the user fees are frozen.
Yeah, and to be honest, my frustration, I've been doing this a long time. We're still governed by the Ministry of Natural Resource document that was written in 1997. In that document, it said the province will give us 50% of operating costs for certain programs. They don't. They haven't for years and years. And we keep bringing this to their attention. So every year we do what's called our Section 39 transfer payment agreement, which is our money for flood forecasting and warning dam operations, and a little bit of planning and permitting stuff. Every year we put in the actual cost. Every year it gets sent back to us and said, that's not the amount of money you get, so report the amount of money. So our actual cost is 800,000 or 900,000, but we can only ask for the 180,000 that they're 160,000 that they give us. That's the game we play every single year. So and I fully understand the impact of the frustration. We were hoping with a change from the Harris government to the McGuinty government, that there would have been changes. All they did was keep it the same and then cut back a little bit more. Then obviously the current government's got a little bit more drastic with that. So it's just one of the challenges we face. And unfortunately here, we do have limits to what I can do to generate revenue. So for example, if you look at our conservation areas, we used to be able to get money. If you look at a lot of the structures at our conservation areas, those are funded by monies from the province of Ontario in the 70s and the 80s. Those funds just do not exist anymore. So for me to improve my roads, improve my water and sewer, which would enable me to increase our campground size or charge more for our campgrounds for use example. We can't get that. Like there's small grants here and there that we can do. 100 meters of road or something, but the big projects we're very limited by. Also too here, parks can be a huge revenue generating source. But in this area, because people have lots of land to go to, it's not that special thing that it is in a major metropolitan area. So we struggle with that. We are trying to come up with more ways to generate revenue, but we ultimately reach certain limitations on what we can do.
Other than that, it's just thank you for being here, and I'm sure next budget season we'll have more questions for you, so it's for you to be here.
Councilor Rodriguez, we'll wrap it up after this.
Thank you. Sorry, you just mentioned some items there. When you're speaking of the lands like the campgrounds and stuff, and it's harder to generate revenue. Part of the government's mandate or direction was to gather a list of lands owned by conservation authorities, maybe for disposable or being used for buildable homes. And maybe that's why, because they're not generating. So was that ever prepared?
So we have a document. So we now have a lands inventory document prepared that falls within the provincial guidelines. Most of our properties are not suitable for development. So that wipes out that as a
Being able to just.
dispose of them, yeah. And the recreational properties are to be kept because they have a certain purpose, certain use. And the province has acknowledged that they're not necessarily disposable assets. That we can just, ultimately it's going to be up to the board of directors what they wish to do. But based in terms of our documentation and the fact the boxes we have to tick off for the province, we're fairly limited in terms of properties we have to dispose of.
And then the last question, we had a document that was under our recommended reading at our planning meeting. Pointing out that as of April 1st, some items that were previously required permit will be now exempt. So will that help remove some burden on the permitting and regulations?
We're sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. We're figuring that out. It's I know the one big impact will be on the drainage side of things, so we're still figuring that out because our report is going to our board for our April meeting that further explains all that. So that'll better clarify that. But to be honest, the way the province has sent out the changes, we have way more questions than what they're giving us answers for. We had a session with the province 2 weeks ago. All they did was literally read off the PowerPoint slides that we'd already seen before that. There was no answering of our questions specifically around wetlands was one, because they've drastically changed the buffer zones for wetlands from 120 meters to 30. So we had a lot of questions about about existing developments and how we're going to cope with that, and they just would not answer those questions. So we still have a lot of answers to come up with from the province, but as I said, there will be a clarification coming to the board at our next meeting.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And thanks again for coming and spending your time with us. And thank you for taking care of our representatives, Conservation Authority. It's your responsibility.
We'll do our best.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you very much, Council.
Safe trip.
Thanks, Ken.
Happy to
Ken.
Thank you.
Alrighty.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ken.
Okay, council, let's go to item 5.1 on the agenda, business arising from previous meetings. Mr. Sabansky, I believe you have a report on that.
I do.
So the meeting, which I did not attend, I was informed by our clerk that there was a discussion in regards to a backup system for our electronic meetings. So we did sit down and look at options. So the problem that occurred, the meeting in question, was a software update issue. The Zoom needed to be updated. Well, the provider of the electronic system has told us in the past never to restart it because it could disconnect the camera system. And that's exactly what we had to do to update the computer. I myself, in a pinch when the whole system froze before everyone arrived, have restarted it and it reconnected just fine. But the staff here, the night of the issue, were not aware of that. So the process for them was to contact the others. And I understand they did an excellent job also contacting all the applicants, all the people who wished to speak, and took care of that through other means. So they handled the situation greatly. As far as a backup goes, we think the most economically feasible way to back it up would be to use some of our existing hardware. We currently have, some of you from previous term will remember the Owl. It's a small camera microphone that would sit in the center of the room. It rotates 360 degrees. Picture quality is not perfect. The sound quality is not perfect, but it helped us get through the first few months of COVID fairly well. So we think that is a reasonable, no-cost backup. So what we would do is if it hit the fan, we would set up a table in the center of the room with a laptop, an extension cord, and the Owl. The Owl and the laptop would record the meeting onto the hard drive of the computer. Once the meeting is done, we would up that immediately to YouTube. That way there's still a record and people can still watch. It would likely be delayed a few hours, if not to the next day, but the meeting would still be recorded and still be made available for the public. So we think given that is zero cost, that is a great backup option. Because to look for additional programs and others, there are some low cost programs available. Thank you, Councilor Rodriguez, for providing that information. But it turns out to be redundant because you'd be streaming on two applications at the same time. And if you had to switch from one application to the other, you'd have to find a way for anyone who wanted to watch live that night to notify them as that. So we think the bylaws that's written doesn't necessarily say that we have to broadcast live. We shall try to, and that a good backup is just to record it and post it later. So unless council tells me otherwise, that's how staff plan to proceed at this time.
Okay, Council, everybody good with that? Okay, thank you. Deputy, sorry.
You have that old owl sitting around somewhere you can retrieve it, and
The Owl will be returning to this office within the next day.
the old owl?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, fantastic.
Where did it go?
Probably Florida. Deputy.
Deputy.
Sorry,
Sure.
You were there?
You got promoted, Darren.
We loaned it to our community partners, the County of Plympton, and they were returning it before council and got held up. So I just got an email. It'll be here shortly. Not that we need it tonight, but he's dropping it off after office. So you may see the owl appear this evening. In the meeting. The owl.
It's an owl.
just the alley.
Yeah.
It's a device. It's called an owl.
When you.
I think this is
speak.
cool. How did you take anything seriously where this owl's been?
It does have two eyes that spin in.
And free to vote. All right, thank you, Mr. Sabansky, and thank you, staff, for looking at that issue and coming up with a solution that's cost effective for us. We do appreciate it. Hey, council, let's go to item 6 on your agenda. Adoption of the committee, the meeting minutes. I have a motion by Councilor Van Claveren, seconded by Councilor Wolvette. Minutes be adopted by council, that those confidential minutes, the closed sessions of council remain confidential and restricted from public disclosure in accordance with the exemptions provided in the Municipal Freedom of Information Protection of Privacy Act. That would be our regular council meeting minutes of the 13th of March, 2024, and the closed regular council meeting minutes of the 13th of March, 2024. Council, you've had an opportunity to review them in your package. Are there any questions? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor? Carried. Okay, council will move on to 6.2. A motion by Councilor Wolvette, seconded by Councilor Van Claveren. The minutes be adopted by council, and those confidential minutes of the closed sessions remain confidential and restricted from public disclosure in accordance with the exemptions provided in the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. It would be your January the 11th, 2024 minutes of the Wyoming Public Cemetery and Inactive Cemetery Committee minutes. The Environmental Service Committee meeting minutes of February the 1st, 2024. Our Fire Executive Committee meeting minutes of the 12th of February, 2024. Our Court of Revision for the Inverkehren Drain meeting minutes of 13th March 2024. And the consideration meeting of Confederation Line East Norman Street South and King Anderson Extension Drain 2024 meeting minutes of the 13th March 2024. We have Counselor Wolvette here as well as Counselor Bojan. And we have Counselor Van Claveren relating to drainage. Are there any questions in any of those? Not, all those in favor? Carried. Okay, let's go to counselors' reports. Deputy?
All right, let's start with Mr. Wolvett.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
You're welcome.
Greatly appreciate. Won't go into a lot of detail, but we had a very busy fire exec meeting. As you'll see on the minutes here, on the agenda here tonight, there's 3 items we'll be discussing there, so I won't go into a lot of detail, but it was a very busy fire meeting. Same with the cemetery committee that we had, very busy meeting, and just to sum that one up, we're rewriting the bylaws for the active and inactive cemeteries because they are basically out of date and need to be upgraded to reflect 2024. So that's just a couple of highlights, but they were both long meetings this time.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Van Claveren.
Deputy Mayor, thank you. Yes, so we've had a number of drainage meetings, a quarter revision for the Invercarn drain, consideration meeting for the Norman Street Federation Line, King Anderson. As you saw, intro meeting for Heron Crest and Kernahan drains. And the first Lambton County Historical Society meeting of 2024 is tomorrow night. That's in Brook, Alvinston. That's a potluck, and I'm planning on bringing meatballs.
Good for you.
And also want to remind you folks that on April 18th, the Royal Canadian Legion in Sarnia, there's the opportunity to go to the Lambton County Rural Game Protective Association. Should be a fun time,
Otherwise known as the Birds and Bees.
otherwise known as Birds Bees.
Is that all you have?
That's it for me. Thank you.
And you've been very busy with drains. Will you
Totally.
stop it? Oh, Mr. Belgian.
Thank you. No committees met for me since the last council meeting. But we do have the Easter event coming up on Saturday at the Kamalaka Community Center. And speaking of which, you can't have good without evil, and it sounds like there's some scams happening in terms of taking money for vendors at our events. So to be clear, there's no vendors at our Easter event, but it does sound like there's a scammer or two trying to solicit e-transfers from people to reserve it. So if you're not contacted in person by one of our community members or by a Plympton-Wyoming email address or our Plympton-Wyoming events Facebook page, it's probably a scam and forward it on to staff.
Ever wonder what happened to honesty?
Yeah, you gotta wonder.
No. Is that it? Mr.
That's everything. Thank you.
Mr. Vasey.
You're asking politicians about honesty.
Well, you got it.
Last week, Parks and Rec Committee, a bunch of members, a few of the councilors went out to Blue Point Park for a site visit. So it wasn't a meeting, it was a fact-finding tour, which was very good. It was such a beautiful spring evening,
The worst day shows and everybody froze.
100-mile-an-hour wind coming off the lake. It was beautiful. But yeah, we collected a lot of info, which will be brought up at the next meeting in April. And
Yeah,
I know there's probably
that's good turnout.
35-40 people there, I guess.
Yeah. Couldn't hear everybody because a lot of them were talking at the same time. I'm sure somebody had to be talking to themselves because there's more than half talking at the same time. Ms. Rodriguez.
Um,
You doing anything? No? Okay, thank you. No.
no, I'm nothing.
Oh, you meant no.
I meant no.
Oh, okay. Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, Deputy. First of all, I'd like to thank you for hosting the Chambers Breakfast at the Egg Society last week. Special thanks to the Egg Society for the breakfast and the hospitality. There have been a lot of good compliments come in about that. And people certainly appreciated the hospitality that was extended from those in attendance from Plympton-Wyoming. As you heard at our planning meeting, our CAO and I met with MP Peter Fragakatis, along with Mayor's Case and Mayor Loosely, relating to the housing issue. I'm looking forward to the Kamlaki Community Center on Saturday for the Easter extravaganza, and just for all those kids that are listening, the real Easter Bunny will be there. So we're looking forward to that. And tomorrow I have laws meeting, which the chair is away, so I will be at the helm running laws tomorrow, board meeting. So that's all I have. Deputy, what about you?
Yeah, well, you mentioned the Chamber of Commerce having their meeting here at Wyoming Agricultural Building, and it was great. The meal was fantastic. The meeting was very interesting. The only thing was that the picture in the paper, you know, had a picture of the head table, and the last four on that end didn't turn in it, and I was one of them, really. So I was really surprised at that. However, it was a good meeting. And you know what was really nice about it was when the speeches were being made, there wasn't one noise came out of that kitchen. You didn't hear a clang of a dish or anything like that, or it was really nice.
Well, they are trained professionals.
Yes, they obviously that. And I also attended a bake-off at the library, which you couldn't attend. I don't know if that was on purpose or what, but no, it was very good. The kids did some baking over there at the library, and we had to taste and decide which one was the best. So, and all the things that they made were very tasty. It was just at 10 o'clock in the morning, you know, I would have eaten them all, except it was too early to do all that. So that was fun too. And then that cold Blue Point day that we attended, and that's about all I've done. I'm done now.
Okay, well, I think just to add to your thing, the library, any of the activities they have there are really good.
Yeah,
And I think a lot of times our residents aren't aware of them.
yeah.
And anything we can do to promote it, because they have a good staff that works hard. And the kids are really,
Yeah, it sounded like they did a lot of activities there, and that they had a lot of good attendance too, so.
that's good.
Right.
All right, well, thank you. Thanks, everybody. Okay, let's go to item 7, accounts. Clerk, anything under that?
No items at this time.
All right, let's, we have presentations at 6 o'clock. Council, if you're comfortable with it, let's go for another 10 minutes and then take a break and allow those people that are going to be taking part to join with us. Is everybody comfortable with that? All right, let's go to item 8.1. A motion by Councillor Vasey, seconded by Councillor Rodriguez, that the report by Elizabeth Cummings, Drainage and Engineering Coordinator, dated March 18th, 2024, regarding the petition for drainage works by owners Lot 16, Concession 2, 476 Zone Street, be received, and that council accepts the petition as filed, appoints R. Dobbin Engineering Incorporated to make an examination of the area and prepare a report on the matter in conjunction with the current Stonehouse drain. We have Ms. Cummings with us this evening. Any questions, council? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor? Carried. Okay, council will go to item 8.2 on your agenda. I have a motion by Councillor Van Claveren, seconded by Councillor Wolbeck. That a report prepared by Jessica Wilson, Executive Assistant Public Works, dated March the 11th, 2024, regarding the McAndrew Drain KIF branch tender be received and the corrected tender from Hornblower Enterprise Limited for $43,972.82, including HST, be accepted, and bylaw 29 of 2024 be approved and taken as have been read 3 times, and the mayor and clerk be authorized to sign the said bylaw accordingly. I know Ms. Wilson is not with us, but I know Ms. Cummings is. Is there any questions on this one? Councillor Vasey.
Just a quick one on Hornblower Enterprise. Have we used them before?
It was my question, if I may direct that to Ms. Cummings.
Through the chair, we have not recently, but they are an established company. They've been around for a long time. Many other municipalities use them.
Okay, just first I've heard of them. So.
Yes.
You're good.
Thetford, is that right? Thetford, I think.
Yeah.
Yep.
I liked how that drainage counselor jumped right in there.
It's just got now. It's automatic.
Any questions on that? Let's call for the vote. All those in favor? Carried. Council, let's go to 8.3. Motion by Councillor Van Claveren, seconded by Deputy Mayor McCune, that the report prepared by Jessica Wilson, Executive Assistant Public Works, dated March the 11th, 2024, regarding the Faulkner Ramsey drain and the lower Arboretor Creek tender be received, and that the tender from McNally Excavating Limited for $925,131, including HST, be accepted. The bylaw 28 of 2024 be approved and taken as having been read 3 times, and the mayor and clerk be authorized to sign the said bylaw accordingly. Once again, Ms. Wilson's not with us, but Ms. Cummings is. Any questions on that one? Call for the vote. All those in favor? Carried. Go to 8.4. Motion by Councillor Wolvette, seconded by Councillor Van Claveren. The report prepared by Paul De Silva, Director of Public Works, dated March 11th, 2024, regarding the Confederation Line reconstruction tender results and recommendation to be received in the tender from Cope Construction Incorporated for $1,215,859.80 without HST be accepted, and that bylaw 30 2024 be taken as been read 3 times and finally passed, and the mayor and clerk be authorized to sign the said bylaw. Really, the author of that report, Mr. De Silva, is with us. Is there any questions? Councilor Rodriguez?
Thank you. So I guess my one question is it was proposed in here that maybe go with a 4-way because we're running into some difficulties.
Mr. De Silva?
Yeah, through you, your worship. Yeah, so we're not recommending that we go with a 4-way.
Alternative.
Yeah, it's an alternative if we get the cost estimates from Hydro One and it's not palatable to this council that we move forward with the relocation. We could look at an always stop as an interim solution.
So my only concern with that, I guess, is we have an agreement with the County of Lambton for 50% of the costs of the, I don't know if that's up to a dollar value, of the traffic lights, and maybe that might be put in jeopardy. So I just think that maybe that should have some consideration too.
Certainly, and again, I'm not recommending, I'm just providing it as an alternative. If Hydro One comes back and says it's gonna cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to do this relocation, plus the $400,000 it's gonna cost for the traffic light installation, well, we may decide that it's not worth it to move forward with it at that time, and we could include an always stop as an interim solution. But I don't think it's gonna cost that much, and I'll be providing additional information once it's available.
I guess when you say interim solution, that doesn't sound like a permanent solution. So eventually these costs would come up anyway.
Correct, like for example, if we didn't have the budget this year to do it, and we could possibly push it off to next year. I know that there's been, some desire to have some stop control at that intersection. It can be difficult to turn left there at times, certain times of the day, and the always stop would provide at least an interim solution. But certainly I'm not recommending it at this time. I'm just saying it's a potential if the cost estimates come back too big.
Just to follow up on Councillor's comments, you would be keeping us up to speed and
Oh, absolutely, yes.
And do we have a proposed start date when this project's going to be kicking off?
Yes, we do. I just talked to Cope about that today, and they're looking at April 22nd.
Wow. And will we be notifying, I know we've talked to the residents about the drains and stuff that's going on, but will we be notifying them, because some of them weren't able to come to the meetings and that, like a mail out or something, inform them that this will be what's going on.
Yes, we're intending on having a public meeting. So we'll have a pre-construction meeting with the contractor first, and then we'll have a public meeting following that meeting. We can answer any questions that come up.
Okay. No further questions? Councilor Bolger?
Based on that agreement that we got with the county, is that hydro relocation considered part of the traffic light piece and would be cost shared?
Yes, it would.
That's the only question. Thank you.
Councilor Willett?
There been any thoughts around diverting traffic around Wyoming during that period of time, like maybe out Petrolia line to Forest Town line and on through to the highway? Any thoughts for a detour of trucking?
Yeah, we'll get into the specifics of how we're going to detour, but we've been talking to the county about what their requirements are for detouring, and they've suggested that we should use county roads.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Okay, we'll look forward to that information. Anything further? Yeah, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor? Carried. Also, let's go to item 8.5. A motion by Councillor Bojan, second by Councillor Vacy. The report prepared by Josh Booth, Engineering Coordinator, dated March the 20th, 2024, regarding a request for an encroachment agreement, the installation of 2 gates within a town-owned alley, be received and staff be directed to prepare an encroachment agreement associated bylaw. Although Mr. Booth's not with us, I know Mr. DeSalva was here and prepared to answer any questions that we have related to that. Are there any questions? Councilor Rodriguez?
Thank you. I did a walkthrough on some of these alleyways. And I didn't really, I didn't realize some of them were literally split down. Is it because this property acquired an additional property? Is this one of the regular alleyways that have infrastructure in them? That are typically in people's backyard?
Through your worship, yeah, it has a water main through this alleyway, so it literally dissects the property in half. I believe it's the same roll number for both parcels.
Was it always that way, or did they purchase the additional property and that's how this came to be in the middle of somebody's property?
No, the alleyway was included in the original registered plan for Wyoming.
It was, okay. It's interesting. And then how would this work? Because the public uses these alleyways as walkways quite often. Is this one generally used for that purpose?
Yeah, through your worship, I don't believe that the public uses these alleyways. They're just grassed and use it. The property owner probably uses them, but they can't put any fences across them without an encroachment agreement. And that's why this gentleman is requesting that, because they want to close the backyard in for the kids and their pets and stuff like that. So the actual permanent structure of the fence would be located solely on their property. Only the gates would be included on the alley.
I understand. And I just know from talking to many people residents in Wyoming that a lot of people do use these alleyways. And a lot of times for purposes. And some people actually park and walk them, so that's why I put that question. So I was concerned about public going through middle of somebody's yard is really weird. So,
Mr. Silva, if I may, this alleyway is a green space. It's not one used for traffic or pedestrian traffic at this time.
okay, so no public is regular. That's between.
Councilor Vacy?
Yes, we get this request probably once a year from somebody along there. At this point, we've denied every one of them. So if we're gonna make a shift in our way we're gonna handle the thing, then in effect, there'll be a bunch of them come along, because there's a bunch of people that want to do this, and we keep telling them no, because we don't want them. So that's all I've got to say.
Yeah, it was one of my comments I was going to share too, is that we had one last year, I believe, and we turned it down at that time. Are there any further questions on this? Councilor Wolvett?
Well, that was just gonna be my comment too, is that, once gates go up and fences go up, now it's all of a sudden it's our property, everybody stay off it, but if it's a public alleyway right away, I mean, people are entitled to, it is a green space, I suppose, they're entitled to walk across it if they want, so if we do agree with it, I think it needs to be made pretty clear that it is public property if they want to walk through it, but I'm assuming once the gates are up, you know, they're not gonna want anybody walking into their backyard, so it may create some problems if somebody pushes it, which may. So, I don't have an issue with it, but the guy gotta be made clear that if somebody decides they want to walk through there, that locking it off. If we make that rule, I don't know, Adam, whether the gates go up, that's it, nobody can go through there, or I don't know. Is that what we're agreeing to here? Basically?
You're deterring public use, certainly.
Counselor Van Claveren, you had.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's clever. I don't see, if you look at that property, it, for all appearances, is their lawn. And so if there's folks walking through there, there's a number of other ways that they can. Do some of these. And for all visual appearances, their back lawn. So I don't certainly have an issue with it. It would, and their dogs and. A lot of sense.
Counselor Rodriguez?
Yes, thank you. So I was kind of surprised at Councillor Fazy's comments and then you. That this is, how many backyards are split in half like this? Because any of the alleyways I walked through was at the end of their property. Do you know what I mean? So is this a unique situation on one street?
Silva?
Through your worship, no, it's pretty much universal right down Broadway Street. So anybody that fronts on the Broadway Street, east and west, have an alleyway with water main that runs through their backyard.
Right through the middle of their backyard?
Yes.
And that's all right. And I totally agree, gates should go up, especially if they have, animals. And I would find it weird, somebody walking through the middle of my backyard. And it's certainly not something that they created, you know, they didn't sever or purchase an additional lot to create.
Any further questions or discussion? Well, that,
Well, just to confirm it. It's not an easement, right?
Town owned alleyway.
Definitely a town-owned alleyway. Okay, well, maybe it shouldn't be. Maybe it should be an easement, and then that would solve the problem.
They would still require an encroachment agreement, whether it's an easement or an alley.
But it wouldn't it take away the public access part of it?
It would reduce the public access portion of it. But those alleyways, when the initial plan was registered, they're all public road allowances, so you'd have to deregister them as public road allowances, then declare them surplus, and then you'd have to put an easement on top of that as part of that legal process.
Yeah.
So it would be a fair legal process to go through.
any further, council? Questions? Okay, we're gonna call for the vote. I'm gonna reread the. Okay. Moved by Council Bojan, seconded by Councilor Vaizey, that the report prepared by Josh Booth, Engineering Coordinator, dated March 20th, 2024, regarding a request for an encroachment agreement for the installation of 2 gates within a town-owned alley be received, and that staff be directed to prepare an encroachment agreement and associated bylaw. Call for the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? It carries. Okay, council, it's about 8 minutes to. We're gonna call a recess at this time because we have some special presentations at 6 o'clock. So those that are joining with us virtually, ask you to stand by. We'll come back live at 6 for the presentations. So council, you have 7 minutes of personal space, and we'll ask you to be back in your chairs at 1 minute 2, please.